Good evening, citizens of Earth. 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 Citizens of Earth.
After 21 years of democracy, has the Constitution been successful in helping guide the transformation of South Africa? What have been the major wins? What have been the major challenges? Do we face a genuine constitutional and rights-based crisis, as the media have it, or are we facing a moral panic?
What's so scary about smart girls? Why did Boko Haram, instead of bombing one more army barrack somewhere, decide to abduct 300 girls from school? Why did people in Pakistan decide to plant a bullet in Malala Yousafzai's head? What's so scary about smart, educated girls? The answer is that smart, educated girls change entirely the power structures in any society. I mean, you can still abuse your wife if you're abusing your husband, but it's a little more difficult to do it if she's educated, if she's empowered, if she's had a position in society, if she has a job. That's why those who don't want to change power structures want to violate what? Human rights. Why? Education. One of the biggest human rights enshrined in the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights.
What I want to understand is the free education across the board, even for those who are privileged. I just want to understand the process in terms of the struggle as it's going to continue. Are they fighting for free education for every student, or free education for those who are coming from the poor background, for those who are marginalized, and for those who are vulnerable?
Discussions in society that has happened over the last year reminds us that when we talk about transformation, it's also about values. It's about what kind of society we want to build, what kind of knowledge is going to count, what kind of knowledge is going to have an impact. It is about values in terms of how do we treat people. Are we actually a society in which people are not discriminated against because of their race, or their gender, or their sexual orientation, or their ability or disability, or whatever the case might be?
At the heart of many of our social ills is poverty. While we laud the rule of law and the power of the Constitution to deliver the life South Africans deserve, access to justice remains a limited privilege only those who can afford the audience of the courts and other such institutions can actually enjoy.
There's a quote from Professor Stephen Friedman that I want to read out, using his quote because it's then he's not part of my organization, so it's somebody else who's got some form of respect who has a view. But he talks about the view that courts should decide what government policy should be is not only anti-democratic because it wants unelected judges to dictate to elected politicians, it also removes the most important weapon which poor people have, their ability to act to change the world.
We took 25 of some of the country's greatest minds and put them through a process of drawing up a national plan. And these minds, they went through about, I think it took them about 3-4 years or so. They canvassed the whole of society and came up with a document which is almost 500 pages long called the National Development Plan. It's there. It should be implemented. Society should own it, and government should be a lot more enthusiastic about it than it is. And actually, if we implemented 20% of the NDP by 2030, actually would be quite a different place as South Africa. But we've hardly got off the starting blocks on the NDP.
I've got a question that has always troubled me. Is the notion of equality before the law a misnomer? Our constitution provides that everyone is equal before the law. So the injunction is absolute. It says everyone. It does not say some are equal more than others. You know, it says everyone is equal before the law, right? But what happens on the ground, it becomes a contradiction in terms. When someone with a political clout or someone who's well connected comes before the courts, they seem to be to enjoy, favors.
As South Africans, we must be worried when there are signs that some of the institutions of our democracy are deliberately being weakened so that they become dysfunctional. We must be scared when our law enforcement agencies cannot focus on fighting crime because of infighting. Our citizens must be vigilant. So he's calling on civil society, because that was part of his civil society role as a board member of Casarada Foundation, but calling on all of us to keep an eye on government for fairly obvious reasons.
I want to thank the student for praising not only me, but the Legal Resources Center that has been of assistance to the students, because we believe in the rule of law. And we don't believe that you send tanks or policemen to arrest students or to shoot at them. And Mr. Lambrinidis is looking at me, where I get this idea that you send tanks to put students in their place. And we have, however, omitted to have regard to the poor.
Just for the record, and it brings an interesting dynamic, Wits SRC and other SRCs across the country who partake in the whole thing are affiliated to the Progressive Youth Alliance, which is also affiliated to the ANC Youth League. And I'm saying this specifically because just because we are ANC members does not mean we cannot be critical of the ruling party. In many ways, we should be more critical of it because we are members of the party and saying, if you're going to be a member of the party and you're going to represent us, you must represent us correctly.